welcome back to Magic and the Noise. Today we have guests joining us. We're going to be doing a lot today. We have 2 targets to cover, and I'm also going to be doing a little bit of a presentation on CRV. Is it useful? And so before we jump into that, I'd like to say hello to everyone. Patrick, hello.
Hey, how are you?
Well, how are you doing today?
I'm fine.
And Patrick, do you want to say a little bit about yourself, your method of remote viewing, and which targets you worked?
Yeah, I started out some time ago with SRV, but I did a course CRV with Sandra Hellert Academy. And a couple of years ago, I did the HRVG course with the Ascension Center from us. So, and I'm joining Looking Glass as well, just to keep on practicing and find the progression in remote viewing.
Nice, thank you. And Michael?
Yeah, so I'm doing pretty well this afternoon where I am. And yeah, so the method I used was kind of CRV, but kind of less structured versions because I'm pretty new to remote viewing, kind of more of a dilettante. And I had fun kind of experimenting and doing both the targets available. So looking forward to exploring that with people.
Yeah, I think I would call your protocol maybe more freeform.
Freeform. That's a good word for it.
Yeah. And Karen, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I started in 2022. I started with a course, and then I did 1 year. I didn't do anything with it, and now I'm starting again. So I liked it. Like it, yeah.
Very nice. And which target did you work?
With targets?
Which of the 2?
Oh, the first one.
Nice.
First one, and that was
the rice experiment. Yeah.
That's right.
And Patrick, so we have 2 Patricks today. I'm going to be referring to the Patrick beside me, I guess on this side, as Dutch Patrick because he lives in the Netherlands. And the other Patrick down below is Irish Patrick because he's Irish. And so Irish Patrick, do you want to say a few words?
Hi, my name is Patrick. As you know, I'm based in Galway in Ireland. And the method I used for both targets was TRV, or technical remote viewing, the Ed Dames format. I'm remote viewing formally self-taught for about 8 years, but I have trained in the last year with Glenn and Sita in HRVG. But I guess I'm kind of intuitive for most of my life, but just no structure behind it, so it was kind of haphazard and random. But so now it's kind of, I mainly use TRV at the moment because in practice sessions I use HRVG because I'm not as familiar with it.
Yeah, and TRV, that's with Ed Dames, yes?
Yes, yeah, Ed's method, yeah.
So Patrick and David and I had a nice conversation with Ed Dames recently, and so we're working on editing that, and then we'll try to get that up in the next few weeks. So look out for that. And then we have Claudia. Is it Claudia or Claudia?
Is there a difference? No, it's just Claudia. Yeah.
Claudia.
Well, I'm from basically Amsterdam in Holland, and I started the course also with Sandra Hilliard in 2022, the end. So after that, I practiced some targets from her and some other websites, and then Patrick gave us some targets. And well, that's how we're doing, and I love it. It's very, we have a small community, and I love it. Yeah, it's very nice to do. And I work with the CRV then because that's what I learned from Sandra.
Yes. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so the 2 targets that we had the rice experiment with Dr. Matsuro Emoto. And the second target is an astronomical compendium that's located at the British Museum. And the data that came in was fascinating for both. And so I'm really excited to share this. So first I'm going to do my little presentation that I've set up to talk about, is CRV useful? And I'm using CRV as an anchor or a place marker. But what I'm really talking about is what of the military developed and derived methods of remote viewing? What are they good for, and are some better than others for different types of targets? Because that was something that came up in this leading up to this live stream. So I'm going to share screen with you now. I think maybe something a little bit bigger. I think that will do. And so let me present. Okay, and can everyone see my screen?
No, not yet.
Now you can, yes?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. And I do apologize for not having this in PowerPoint, but I was saying earlier, my PowerPoint's crashing. If anyone can provide some technical help for that, let me know in the comments down below. And so, yeah, and so before I begin, I wanted to note that I will be offering private analysis this summer, also advanced RV training and private client work. We've started kind of looking at that and testing that out. And so we have two targets. I put out what I'm calling a standard target and the complex advanced target. Part of that was in response to some of the limitations of some of the methodologies in gathering the data that met the level that people expected, I think, for their own work. I'm just going to do something very quickly here. I'm just going to add a bit of a mute here. Okay. Okay, so one of the things I think people should be aware of is remote viewing as it's popularized today. Most of the methods that we use have military origins. This is a map from Daz Smith's website. He has an amazing website. It has all kinds of resources. It's remoteview.com. And on here, he has, you know, really all remote viewing that's done today, nearly all of it stems from the military CRV programs, the coordinate remote viewing, initially or now controlled remote viewing. And so one of the things that we have to think about is when the military developed remote viewing, what were their priorities? What were they trying to get out of the work? Just because there's a bit of an echo, if the guests want to mute themselves just while I do this little bit, and then after that we can unmute and we can all discuss, that would be fantastic. There are a few remote viewing styles, techniques, methodologies, and protocols that have now been developed more recently that don't stem from the military protocols. So there's my own, which I'm launching in a few months, the full spectrum illumination. And although I was trained in CRV and I was trained in HRVG, I consider this too different from either of those to really fit under that umbrella. And my purpose is to not create a methodology that prioritizes what the military prioritized when they first developed this, and that's kind of just been replicated through all these different methods. And I think, so we have Anita's system here and the cowboy system as well. And those also, I think, are veering far away from the basic military protocol. So the issue that I see with some of these methodologies is that they have such a strong bias towards describing structures, landscapes, and biologicals. Because if you're using this for the military, you want to know, where is the military base? Where are the structures on that base? Where are the dogs and the men with guns, right? That's your priority. You don't need to know how people are feeling today. You don't really need to know what they're thinking about. You don't need a lot of conceptual data. You really just want to know, what are the structures? Where are they in the landscape? And are there humans present? Or biologicals, as is often referred to include aliens, but also dogs and other animals. And so, you know, I think it's such a strong bias. And because it's taught from the start, a lot of people don't question that. And then they forget that there's that bias and it's quickly overlooked. And I think the problem with that is because people have that bias and these assumptions that when they work a target, there's going to be a structure, there's going to be a landscape, and there are going to be biologicals, or there's going to be one of those things. I think sometimes they try to work a more complex or a more conceptual target, and they fall short. And so this then, I think, moves them to explore on their own, because I think there isn't a lot of advanced training for remote viewing, and the advanced training that does exist is often very expensive, or very exclusive. And so I think because of that, people who only have the I guess what's maybe more accessible in terms of the protocols, they start trying to find other ways to get better data, to get richer data, to get conceptual data. And so I think that's when they start looking at, okay, well, what are the occult practices that I might integrate into my protocol to get more of the data that I want to get? Or they look into things like shamanism, because they want to improve their RV, and maybe they don't want to pay the high prices for the advanced, or it's just not available to them. And so I think that that's a problem when advanced stages are either kept secret or kept behind paywalls, and people are just kind of left to their own devices to kind of develop personal techniques. It's good for a lot of people who are able to come up with something that works for them, but for some, I think it's more of a challenge if they don't have maybe as much of a grounding in these kind of consciousness exploration protocols. And I think everyone kind of wants to be the best remote viewer ever. And so when they start out, right? And so I think sometimes that drives them to try different things that maybe makes them feel more magical, but does it actually work? Does it significantly improve their work beyond the improvement they would have seen just from practicing for that extra 3 months or that extra 6 months? And I don't know that we have publicly a really good way of measuring that, of analyzing that. And so I want to show this little video that I hope will be entertaining. If it will play, we'll see. Oh, it probably will not, because we're in PDF, because my PowerPoint crashed. I will add this in later after the live stream, but it's this idea that our biases, our expectations, our prior experiences really strongly shape what we see, what we interpret, the limits and the boundaries of our psychic abilities. If you think you can't see numbers, you cannot remote view numbers, then you're not going to remote view numbers very well. If you believe that the future is so unseeable because to think otherwise maybe has ramifications that you're not comfortable with or don't fit your worldview, then you're probably not going to be good at remote viewing future events. And so what we believe strongly impacts what we can do as remote viewers. And so it's really important, if you want to be a great remote viewer, to be very aware of what your biases are, very aware of what the beliefs you have around what you can do, what they are, and how they're affecting your work. Okay. And so the point I'm trying to make is that if your protocol, even if it's just an implicit suggestion, if it's implicitly suggesting that you're looking to describe a structure, a landscape, and a biological life form, or even if just the series of practice targets that you work all the time, if those are always the main components, then you might accidentally start describing a structure, a landscape, and maybe the basics of a person if you're not actively thinking about getting data that's going to fall outside of these categories. And, I think we saw that happen a little bit in the targets today, where people take as a given that, oh, I'm seeing something hard, angular. It's a structure. It's a building. I'm describing a building. And so let's go with that. And if I have a building, then there must be a landscape. And so I'm going to describe the landscape. And some targets are not a building in a landscape. And so you have to, when you first start out, you have to get rid of those assumptions. And you really have to start a session cleanly, in a pure state. And so that's one of the ways to prevent falling into that default. And I think, yeah, especially like I have here, especially if what you've been practicing on are targets that are structure, landscape, life form targets. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, this is, I just think it's funny, just this idea that we're using military protocols for non-military application. And yet most people, I don't know, they keep the formula that worked for the military for their types of targets. And I think it's time to free ourselves from that. And so some of the things that came up in the lead up to this live stream about these targets that I gave out, I had some people say, well, I don't remote view mystery targets, and so I can't do this one. And I was thinking, well, if you're a proper remote viewer, then you should always be blind to your targets. And I know that it's quite fashionable now to not be blind to your targets, but then that's not remote viewing, because in order to keep your expectations about a target, your biases, your own beliefs from creeping in, it's really better to work the session blind. And yeah, and that's what I'm going to say about that. If you're a great remote viewer, then you have to be able to provide data that goes above and beyond what's currently known, regardless of what type of target you're working. This is something that I've come, it's a question that I keep kind of wanting to ask people. What is the point of only being able to tell a tasker what they already know, what they have in their tasking package, what they have in their feedback presentation? If you want to be a great remote viewer, you have to be able to tell the tasker what they don't know yet. You have to be able to provide information about the unknown that can be validated either in the future, maybe a discovery is made, maybe because of your remote viewing data, someone goes and does research and finds, oh, that's actually correct. That's the value of a good remote viewer, I think. And then there is also some pushback about people who don't do conceptual targets. And I think all targets include conceptual elements, all. If you're describing a person, then when you're probing for, well, what are the motivations of this person? That's conceptual. If you're wanting to know, well, I see this person jumping over this weird fence. Okay, well, why are they jumping over that fence? And what is it that they're trying to do? Are they accessing something? Are they running away from something? If you're describing a machine, what is the purpose of it? What's its function? What is its role in a bigger infrastructure? These are conceptual elements of a target. If you want to tell me why is this valued, then that's conceptual. And so I think for any remote viewer, you have to be able to deal with conceptual data and conceptual targets if you want to improve, I think, a little bit. Another thing that came up was this idea of, are symbols and metaphors useful or are they bad data? And does a great remote viewer have metaphors in their data? And I would argue that yes. And I kind of wanted to show a little bit of my work to give an example of why I think that symbols, metaphors, complex concepts are valid and valuable data. So here we see something that came through in one of my sessions as a symbol. It was the dove-like Christian symbol for the Holy Spirit. I saw this little, the white bird, the light pouring out from its wings. And I'm comfortable with that as a symbol. I put it down, and then later in my session, I explore it further. Now this symbol starts to come through with a little bit more complexity. And so we're looking at, now it's triggering the idea of communion and the data about the Egyptian rite of communion. Now, the initial symbol has nothing to do with Egypt, but when I start exploring the data and I start probing it later in my session, I'm getting these more advanced concepts. And this was actually the idea of doors, heavy and closing. This is a metaphor that ended up being really good data for this particular target. You can see then when I took it even further in my session, into my stage 4, it comes through in a broader metaphor. So now this kind of Holy Spirit dove with light, now I'm getting that metaphor of, it stands for renewal. It's new life. It's a new cycle. And baptism comes through by water, by ice, by fire. As I progress through and do my second session, this metaphor finally cracks open, and then the data just comes pouring through me and onto the page. And this is where I'm getting the information about what's really going on at the target for this particular element of it. And now I'm saying, okay, this was a pre-flood belief, something related to salvation. And now we're in a post-catastrophe, post-flood moment, and there's been a replacement of a belief or an understanding of the underlying nature of reality or of the afterlife. That one's a little bit too clear. So something about the nature of reality, the nature of the afterlife. There was a belief, and then there was a catastrophe, and then this is a replacement that sprung up. That's really good conceptual data, and it really helps to enrich the session. And if you ignore the symbols, if you ignore the metaphors, I think you stop getting this kind of breakthrough point where the data does pour through to make sense of the symbols and the metaphors that you've been honoring up until that level. So I think that's important to honor. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I'm going to let our guests respond before I go into our target feedback. And so you can unmute yourselves, or I'll unmute you, and tell me what you think.
I agree. I think it has to advance. I mean, we were talking to Ed there a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that, you know, in the military, it was a training tool because they weren't coming into the program with a kind of a structure for their psychic ability. They had to learn one, and you have to train your unconscious how to deliver information. So it has to have a starting point, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where it ends. It might have meant that's where your training ended, but not necessarily where the skill ends itself. And I think you're right as well about the kind of, you know, you may not hit completely 100% a target, but in the military, and I've heard Paul Smith saying this before many times, was that it was an intelligence gathering tool. It wasn't the only tool they used. They had spy in the sky satellites, they had boots on the ground agents, but they were accused in the very end of, like, you know, maybe, you know, they said it was like 30-40% of effective as an information, you know, as a psi tool, and that's not correct. But their argument was also, even if that was correct, if the 35% of data that you provided intelligence-wise was information that they did not have and could not get using the other methods they had, that made it valid and valuable. And that's what it is. You don't want information you know, you want information you don't know. And I think that's where RV really excels.
Yeah, I agree. That's its main purpose, I think, right? What
Yes.
about the others? What did you guys think?
Well, it lacks the space usually for a regular protocol to get your attention to conceptuals, actually, unfortunately.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think there's always some conceptual or metaphoric data that gets in that you can decode in later stage of the protocol. But you have to do it yourself. You have to pick it out and develop it during the session to see what it is.
Yes, exactly. I mean, CRV has a column for intangibles, but there's room for one or two words. Like, you're not asking for a paragraph there. You're just supposed to put, oh, there's this intangible, or, oh, I feel this aesthetic impact of, oh, wow, right? And so they don't give you the room to develop that further. And I think HRVG, that's one of the things I argued with Glenn a little bit about in our meetings often was, where am I supposed to put conceptual data when I'm doing my matrix? I go through my sensory, but now I have all this conceptual stuff coming in. Where does that go, right? And so I think that I just see that as a way to keep remote viewers bounded where they can only get so much data. And I think we need to start pushing back, maybe. Karen, you have a nice little smile. What are you thinking? Oh, hold on, you're muted. I'm going to unmute you. If I can, I cannot. You'll have to. Yeah, there you go.
I'm sorry. Yes, that's what I get also when I do a target. That's difficult when I get information. I go, I don't know how I say that right, but invullen.
Fill out.
Yeah. And with practice, you can learn how to don't mix things, but see things separately. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And what about you, Claudia? Have you had that experience?
Yes, indeed. Well, sometimes I put it at subjects if I get more information, or object subjects, or in the sketch it states 6, but at the summary, it's like some kind of automatic writing, and also the information which you get in the conceptual state is indeed where do you put it, because in the stage of S4 it's so small. So I get your point, what you are saying. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And Michael, is this something that you've come up against yet, or?
Yeah, just from right of the protocols I've seen online, that's very expansive in the amount of categories and things for like parsing out like physical information related to things like structure, like you said in your lecture about military targets and biologicals and so on. But yeah, for me, I don't really see as much a corresponding interest in like how to, I guess, parse out conceptual data that kind of comes in, and that's something would definitely be interested in kind of exploring a bit more and figuring out that kind of thing. Because mostly I look at something and I try and see what kind of feelings land, what kind of ideas or concepts are there. But yeah, I don't know if that's I'm doing it properly or not, or what. So.
And that's the thing, I think, because it's not really in there, people are forced to kind of figure it out for themselves. But the thing is, when you're learning a new protocol, before you start changing it, it's usually better to master it first, and then you can see what needs to be tweaked. But the problem with that is, well, for a lot of people, they don't see that bias. They don't see that they're learning not to look for conceptual data. And by the time they've mastered their protocol, well, now they feel like good remote viewers, so they don't really want to change anything, because they're like, if I change it, maybe it won't be as good anymore, so let's just keep everything the same, right? I think there's always that little bit of fear of like, oh, if something's working and I don't quite know why it's working, I just don't want to mess with it, right? And I think we have to risk messing with it. And maybe at first your performance will be, a little bit less because you're doing something new. Now you have to think about it. It's kind of interrupting your process. But I think in the long run, this is what I found for me in the long run, it's significantly better. My sessions now are just a universe away from what they were when I was, trying to curtail my conceptual data into just margins, back of the page, kind of stuff them into my stage 4 and always running out of room, right? So, yeah.
But where do you put them?
Well, so I've developed my new full spectrum illumination remote viewing. And so I've integrated it into the whole protocol. I revamped the whole protocol. I'm not doing, none of the targets I'm doing are, this is where the military base is, this is where this is where the door is to the guns, and this is where the guy is who's going to shoot me. I'm not doing those targets, so I don't have to have a protocol made for those targets. And so I've just developed something. It's not for beginner remote viewers. It's for advanced. You have to have that understanding of your own kind of way of dealing with the data. You have to understand metaphor versus direct data. But I've just started, I guess, kind of from scratch as much as I could to make something that's more useful. Yeah. Because I think we're now moving into an era when remote viewing is going to be used more and more in the public domain, and we're using it for different applications. And instead of, spending 2 years mastering the basics, and then, like I said, and then someone says, okay, well, now you can change everything about how you're doing in order to learn how to do conceptual, but then people are scared and they're, oh, I'll just stick with what I have, or, right? So, yeah, I think it's a conversation people need to start thinking about. Having said this, you guys got great data on the targets. And the Dr. Emoto rice experiment is a largely conceptual target, because you can describe the rice, the jars, you can describe the man. But if you're curious, there's, how is this working? What is this energy exchange? What's happening? What does this tell us about the nature of intent and reality? And so Yeah, you guys all did very well. And so we're going to jump into that now. And again, feel free to jump in and interrupt. And so I think I'm going to use this view. I think this will be too small. And Claudia, I know you're watching on a small phone. Are you going to be able to see this?
Yeah. I'm into my phone.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, and so yeah, so that was what I was just saying here. The first target that I gave out was a little bit harder for people who were more used to the traditional approach. And so then I came up with a second one. I wanted the second one to be a bit of a challenge. I didn't want to give anybody a structure with landscape and people. I wanted to make it a little bit of a challenge, but still more in the wheelhouse of what you're maybe more used to from practice targets. So we'll get into that one secondly. And then for the audience, Chris is sick, so he's not here, but his data is in a presentation and it's purple. And Claudia, I have you in this nice soft lavender. Cody, who will be joining us shortly, I think he's in teal. Jeff, I hope will be joining us shortly, is in blue. Karen, you're in this nice purple. Michael, blue. Dutch Patrick is in red, Andekirk. And then we have Patrick Flanagan, Irish Patrick, in green. So this is Dr. Emoto. Some people know him from the water experiments where he found that water crystallizes differently depending on the emotion that you imbue it with. But I wanted to focus on the rice experiment where you put the rice in the different jars and see what happens based on the emotion and the intent that you feed the jars. And I have a video here. Because it's not in PowerPoint, I'm going to have to grab it off of YouTube. So if someone wants to talk a little bit while I grab that, that would be excellent.
Can I ask one question? Which target number was this? Rice.
So this was the U6RX YG1F.
Okay, and I'm really mixed up because all these things I wrote on the other target number, so I often have that I mix up things. Okay, but go ahead.
Also there are comments in chat. We should address the comments in chat while I'm opening the other thing. So I'll see if there are any questions in chat. First of all, hello and welcome to everyone in chat. We're delighted to see you here. Let's see. So we have, it's my remote viewing journey is in the audience, and Chris is in the audience. Hello, Chris. We're happy that you're watching. And the intuitive side is also here. Are you guys able to see the comments that are on the live stream? Fantastic. Oh yeah, there they are. Okay. Okay, so if someone wants to talk a little bit with the audience, I'm just going to load up the video. Dutch Patrick, since you're at the top, I'm tempted to give that to you as a task.
I'm starting the YouTube broadcast. Just a second.
David was busy, so he wasn't able to join us today. He had other obligations, so he's not here to help out. Okay, I have the video up, so no worries. No more pressure, no stress. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to share my new screen. I think it's this one. Hopefully it's this one. And can someone let me know pretty much right away if you can hear audio or not? Oops, sorry.
Yes.
Can you hear?
Yeah, audio.
Dr. Emoto has conducted another interesting experiment. He placed rice into 3 glass beakers and covered it with water. And then every day for a month, he said, "Thank you" to one beaker, "You're an idiot" to the second, and the third one he completely ignored. After 1 month, the rice that had been thanked began to ferment, giving off a strong, pleasant aroma. The rice in the second beaker turned black, and the rice that was ignored began to rot. Dr. Emoto thinks that this experiment provides an important lesson, especially with regard to how we treat children. We should take care of them, give them attention, and converse with them. Indifference does the greatest harm.
Some dreamy study, but almost.
So that's the study. That was Dr. Emoto. Also, welcome, David.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Have you had the opportunity to watch a little bit of what we're doing? Did you come rescue me?
No, I've been no. I just showed up. So.
So we're glad to have you here. So I've talked a little bit about the different protocols. We had a nice little conversation about that. And so now we're going to dive into the feedback and the analysis. And
Okay.
we have an audience in chat, so feel free to jump in if there are questions that come in from there. Okay, I'm going to share again. Hopefully this will get smoother with practice. And where is my presentation? Sorry, guys. A little bit of dead silence. It's a good thing it's not a podcast. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. No.
Okay. Because I always forget to add it to the stage. There we go.
There it goes. Yes.
Okay, so the main points of this experiment are that Dr. Emoto took rice, put the rice in jars, and then to the one jar he gave love, to the other jar he gave hate, said mean things, shouted at it, and then to the third jar he just neglected it, he ignored it. And the rice that was loved fermented and was, like they said, gave a pleasant aroma, was still nice and yummy. And the hated rice rotted black, and the neglected rice rotted green. And if you go on YouTube, you can find all kinds of people who've tried it themselves, because it's so hard to believe that it's true. And it's so easy to do. And so many people have tried it themselves, and they've put the results on YouTube. So it's really fascinating to see everyone getting these same results. It's really intriguing. And so that's why I gave it as a target. I wanted people to either describe the jars, the rice, Dr. Emoto, and hopefully touch upon what's happening in the experiment. How is this working? So first of all, we have Cody here, who I think did such a great job of just encapsulating the physical description. We have Dr. Emoto and the 3 jars, and I thought that was fantastic.
Mm.
Yeah. And then here we have Chris, who, again, I thought this was outstanding. So we have the jar of rice as the structure, and then we have the grain of rice as another structure, and the energy being essentially pouring into the grain of rice. And I thought that was fantastic. And as well, you can see here, he had this forceful, invisible kind of energy moving in. I'm just going to mute a few of you because I think there's some noise coming through. Yeah, okay. And again, this is a really good example, I think, of that structure landscape. And then here he has energy, so I think that was really nice that he made space for that. But again, it's that bias of this must be a structure instead of, what is this? Is it a structure? Is it something else? Is it a grain of rice? But still, it was still fantastic data. And here I have, Patrick, we're going to see your data that really resembles what Chris is describing here in a minute. And David, I've muted a few people, but if you can let me know if they're trying to interrupt, and then I can just unmute them. Just the ones where there's feedback coming through.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So here we have Dutch Patrick. Dutch Patrick, I really saw this as you are describing the energy, the intent, how this is working. So this is an example of the conceptual data that I've been talking about. And I like, Dutch Patrick, that in your sessions, in your stage 4, I do see that often coming through, that you do leave room for that conceptual data to come through in your S4, and it does, and it's on target, and it's good data. So I thought that was really nice to see. You have this implosion type feel, underlying process, circular process, that kind of gives us hints about it. And you had the low frequency buzz, that idea of like frequency, I think. Did you want to say a little bit about some of the data that I'm showing here?
Yes, it actually felt like some underlying energy. But usually in later stages of the protocol, I only get conceptual data, or metaphorical. Yeah. Yeah, it was a kind of organic frequency.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that you got that there's a process here. And
Sure.
it's interesting that although you mentioned that it was a process, you didn't restrict it to some mechanical process, or that you were still able to see, no, it's energetic. And so I thought that was really good. Oh, and someone else has joined us, so let me add them in before I move on.
I could
Welcome,
also,
Jeff.
Hello, sorry I'm late.
No
Hey, Jeff.
worries.
The low frequency buzz too is interesting because of if you think about the energy spectrum of, hatred being conceptually being a lower frequency and love being a higher frequency. It's kind of interesting.
That's right. Yeah. Jeff, we've jumped in. And so you're the blue, the lighter blue, and Michael is the darker blue for the data.
Okay.
And David is keeping an eye on the comments from the chat, I think. And so he'll interrupt me if there's something coming in from there. Okay, so let's go to, and here, I think I sent a message to Michael saying, like, I really like the way the data came through in your session. And because it worked on multiple levels. And so, I see these things coming out from this center point. And, if you're looking at a physical only level of analysis, then you can say, okay, these are these grains of rice. But I think when I was looking at Dutch Patrick's work and looking at your work together, it does feel to me that there's this description of the energetic system and something energetic that's happening that here is described as an implosion type feel, that there's something going on here. And I just thought this is a really good representation maybe of something that's happening like that. Did you want to say something about that, Michael? Because I'd like to hear your take on it.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I got this idea of like just these like almost like patches, and just was tuning into that, and I just found this energy kind of coming towards me. So I basically did just draw these like almost like rays. I felt like a very direct kind of energy with that. And yeah, so like, yeah, I did feel like there's like an energetic quality to this when I was initially just like recording that impression.
Yeah, I loved it. I love that you have the grid of reality, and then you have this energy pouring towards you, the viewer. I just thought that was such a fantastic sketch of something conceptual that is hard to describe. And so, yeah, I really thought that worked well. And I think it worked well in tandem with Dutch Patrick's data. I think that those two together kind of strengthen the case for this being something along those lines. And then here's more of Dutch Patrick. So what I really liked was that you had twice in your session, you mentioned that something about putting the puzzle pieces together. And I kind of want you to talk a little bit about the feel of that. But what I put here is, because we're talking about intention and emotion as energy, maybe energy from the ether, but it somehow is being transmitted into the rice, and it's having physical effects on the rice, and it's having different effects on the different jars depending on what the intention is. And so that's very complex. And so I thought that was really interesting. You had this idea of preservation, because the rice that is loved ends up being really well preserved, and observation and discovery. I thought that was good data, because the whole premise of this is that you're observing the effects of your intention. And then here where you have, it's everywhere, this frequency, and it feels like a scientific experiment. I think that's fantastic. It's a perfect description, because this is a scientific experiment. You have your variables, and you're controlling some, and you're doing different things, and you're trying to see what effects the different treatments have. And so I thought that was really good. Did you want to talk a little bit about your data here?
Yes, I also recall that's in the picture on the right. It was materialization of ether in the same shape. So it had something to do with the interaction of the what I saw as the energy frequency, apparently, and this scientific setup. Yeah.
Yeah, I was delighted to see the word ether coming up there in that context. I thought that was mind-blowing.
Yeah, putting the puzzle together was more like in the search of maybe conclusions.
Yeah.
To do something to get a certain result.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And see, so I think you've done a really good job, Patrick, of taking the protocol and forcing in the conceptual data that's coming through in your S4s, in your Cascade, and also in your Blackboard. And so here, I'm going to unmute Irish Patrick. And so here, I'm putting a lot of different people's data together here. So we have Dutch Patrick with the harmonic, right? And release temporarily the pattern to instigate a process, or to initialize a process. I thought that was amazing. Again, the word ether. And then Irish, is it Irish Patrick? Yes, Irish Patrick. You have the DNA, you have the blueprint, you have that it feels intelligent. And I'm thinking you're interacting with the ether with your intent, and then the ether is interacting with the rice and having these different effects. And so this idea of that there's something here that feels like a blueprint, but it feels intelligent, that you're mentioning the frequencies involved, that there has something to do with the light spectrum. I thought that was really good data. Do you want to talk a little bit about all of this? I've kind of scattered it around the page.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of, once I zeroed in on, because it took a bit of time to get it to come into focus, but that was really what I was picking up on. I knew there was energetics there, and then I was trying to break it down to what the energetics were doing, what the meaning of it is. And the blueprint idea was coming through, but it was like I was saying there in that piece, where the DNA allows the formation of biological life, it informs life. And this, whatever was happening here, this energetic was informing and creating a pattern or frequency wave that was creating this pattern in whatever I was witnessing or seeing in my mind's eye. So the idea of the pattern came true. The reason I put in the kind of close encounter thing up here, while that is kind of analytical overlay, I knew it wasn't what it was, but I was getting that idea where you see those crafts in close encounters, and they're communicating with sound with these crafts, and there's kind of do, and that was creating that kind of information exchange, or a sort of a communication, but it wasn't using language, it was using something else, and vibration and sound, and
it was using frequency. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, that's where that AOL was coming from. It's probably a signal line AOL, really. That's what I should have called it, but when you're in session you can't tell. But and I just knew that there was a biological, as we call them here, in very close proximity to what was happening. So there was a connection between this energetic, a biological, and what was being formed or created with the energetics. So that was kind of what was coming through there. It wasn't crystal clear about what it was, but then, you know, you go into a dangerous territory if you try to figure that one out. You just have to just describe, and just, it's the analyst that puts it together, you know.
Yes. And I just thought, you know, one of the reasons I put this kind of centrally, the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, is because it, you know, it's exactly what you're describing. They're using frequency to communicate, and it's an alien intelligence. And so there's that gap, and they're trying to bridge that gap with frequency, with sound. And so I thought that was so relevant. Right. And then also this idea of blocky, segmented, patterned form, and the idea that it's a formation of light. I really think it's that idea of like, how are we shaping reality through our intent?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So again, Patrick, you use TRV, and I find in your sessions as well, you force the conceptual data in there, and you always leave room for it. And it's always, I think, some of your best data from my perspective. I'm a conceptual viewer as well, so I might prioritize or I might enjoy it a little bit more. But I'm always surprised and delighted by the conceptual data that you also get. It's always really on target.
Well, I always ask for before I go into a session, you know. I mean, I don't, you know, you have to give some kind of direction to your because it's communication between your conscious and your unconscious mind. So I kind of ask, I mean, in a kind of some kind of like self-hypnotic routines. I say, this is what I'm doing, this is the target I'm going to work, and this is what I'm asking for in each of these categories, you know. So it works a lot. Sometimes it doesn't work, and there are many variables involved when something doesn't work. So I can't just say it was, you know, because what I suggested to myself didn't work. But I mean, I ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. I think you have to set parameters around what you're doing, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a good insight. Yeah, definitely. And we also have Chris, who's in chat, but too sick to join us on video. I hope you're feeling a little bit better, Chris, or at least that we're amusing you in your flu fever. But Chris got a sense of a halo, and he could feel the heat off of it on his face. And I thought it fits into this series of data points because, again, he's talking about energy, and it's strong energy. He's feeling the heat coming off of it, and that idea of a halo. So this is something light, sacredness, intention, prayer, right? It's all these kind of these ideas that are kind of coming together there. So I thought that was really fun, really nice to see. And then here again, Dutch Patrick, I kind of did these in sequence, so you'll all kind of have your own kind of slides that are mostly your data. But here, this is where I really thought Chris's representation of the rice in the jar with the energy flowing towards it. Again, that was Chris, that's such an amazing hit, really delightful. But I did see the parallels with Dutch Patrick, with your work here, where you also had these ideas of you have the square container, just like his, the jar, and then you have something protruding out of it, just like he does. And then you have something up here. Do you want to talk a little bit about the data here?
Yes, but I can't explain it. I thought I saw a cube shape, but not a manifestation, not a real physical cube, but like in mathematics, like vectors, you know, with directions of the sides. And that's all I know. I just drew it. I'm not sure what it was, actually.
I thought that was really interesting. I really like that data. And I think that it's probably something, you know, as we probe further, as targets become projects, then some of these things you end up getting more information about. But I did think that even just on a physical level, the sketches just mirrored each other really, really well. And I like to see that. A bit of a group effect already. And here again, so I thought, you know, we have Michael with his grid pattern and the energy coming out of it. And we have Dutch Patrick with the cube that he keeps seeing this shape. And we have Chris again with a circle in the square in the cube. And then we have Irish Patrick talking about this blocky segmented pattern form, and these light blocks are held together and the pattern is intelligent. There's something here, I think. What do you guys think? Everyone's too shy. That's okay. We'll move on to the next one. And then Irish Patrick, again, you have these blocks of light. And so did you want to talk a little bit about this and how it relates?
Again, I think like with the, I suppose on my far right anyhow, I've got that really the circular one. This is where I was picking up. There's something circular here that I'm looking at, and there's a waveform pattern on this. And it to me, it was kind of radiating out light. And I don't think, and I wrote there somewhere, oh yeah, I think it's these blocks of light are connected, but they're not perceivable. So it was kind of penetrating kind of what was going on. And I thought the underlying aspect of whatever's here has something that's kind of slightly hidden, but it's informing what's going on. It's creating this wave, this pattern, and it kind of fluctuates like a vibration. This was my kind of trying to sketch out an abstract idea in my mind of what these things meant, and just the bigger circular pattern in the middle is just more of trying to drill down into what is this thing. To me they're like information blocks.
Yes.
You know, like I don't know if you ever seen like a digital file in like I did a little bit of it in the past, where like there's certain sectors on a disk will contain information and there'll be blank spots, and there'll be, you know, so when you're kind of carving out a piece of information on something digitally, like that might be or have been deleted, you can still kind of recover some of those things. And that was kind of the idea, is that there's something in here and it's segmented into blocks, and it's an information and it's a code.
Well,
different codes can be slightly different, you know, depending, like, again, the sequence and the pattern of these things is demonstrating some kind of intent, you know.
The other thing that occurs to me, or I see a correlation potentially with Emoto's other work with the water and the structures in frozen water, like you get the crystalline structures. So
yeah,
this could be representing to a degree conceptually that aspect as well, along with what you're describing, which is packets of information.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then whatever it was up in the top there, it's kind of it was exotic to me in the sense that it's not like it's not something that we're technologically influencing with a pattern. It's something that's outside of that. It's a technology that we can't map maybe or fully understand, and it's composed of a kind of light, and it's coherent and uniform, so it's not random at all.
And that's why I think it ties in really well with Dutch Patrick saying he keeps seeing this. So Dutch Patrick, can you say something about that? Because you kept seeing this shape.
Maybe it's a small detail of a larger fabric. It wasn't really a physical, or at least in the bigger picture, wasn't a physical cube, but it was a kind of, as I mentioned before, information, you know, a kind of fabric.
Yes. Yeah, and I noted that you put here, this shape is of significance. And so that's why that stood out to me when then I saw it again coming through, I think in Michael's grid, and then I saw it again, kind of echoing a little bit in Chris's work, and then I saw it clear as day in Irish Patrick. So I just thought that was really intriguing. So, yeah. And so then we moved to Jeff. I thought this was I saw this sketch and I was really amazed by it because I think it's a really good description of what's going on. So especially you sent me this one first with the clear water, and it's combining, and then it's going into the light and the dark. And, you know, Jeff, your style is a little bit more metaphorical, I think, sometimes. And I love that because you're able to communicate really complex ideas with these simple sketches. And it just kind of comes across. And so did you want to say a few things about this?
So now that I know what the target is, I'm struck looking at over all my data. I would describe this, the way I did this target as my subconscious did not like this experiment.
Oh.
From the standpoint of nothing is ever so black and white. Nothing is ever love and hate. You always have a combination of both.
That's interesting.
So it comes across more in some of my other drawings that didn't quite seem to relate to the target, but now that I know what it is, that seems to be what my subconscious was saying here.
Yes.
It also looks like your diagram is forking off left and right, and it's like light is going one direction and dark is going to another direction.
Yes.
As if it's been focused on two different things. Slightly.
And what I like about it is that they come from the same source. And so I kind of see that, right, is that your intention, you can put it into the light and make the rice good. You can put it into the dark and make it rot. But it's the same stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really fascinating.
It's a really good metaphor for intention, like.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, again, it's a great metaphor. It's a great sketch. You have something complex and you just put it through in this very simple sketch. I really love that. I think I attributed this halo to Chris, but Patrick, is that yours or is that
Chris?
It's
mine, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's just like sometimes, so like when you go into, like, it's kind of, with me anyhow, it's when you zero in on something and you kind of there, I'm not sure what this is, and then you zero in some more and you zero, and you just, I'm going to go in there and find out what this thing is or what it's doing. And at some level, when you go far enough in, there's always going to be heat. You know, and you can feel it. You can feel it physically on your body.
I think that's amazing. And what I thought was interesting about that is that Chris did also have the lightning storm. Dutch Patrick mentions lightning. Chris, again, some kind of force. And then Michael, you have emanations or explosions. So everyone's picking up on a really strong energetic component to this target. And so I thought that was really, really good. Yeah, and Dutch Patrick I put here because you had that sense of lightning maybe, but the low frequency and a voice whispering. And so we're going to get into the vocalizations in the next slide, I think. So I thought that was really good data. Nope, we're still with Jeff. Okay, so here, I think there was a lot of data that came through of a religious, kind of softly religious. And that really fits, I think, because with religion, prayer is essentially intention. And, Dr. Emoto is essentially, praying. He's loving. He's giving thanks to the rice. He's showing gratitude to it in the happy jar. And so I actually think that's data that makes sense. Jeff, for your data, you have these 3 containers, maybe something like incense, but I think these are the 3 jars.
Yes.
And that idea of asking the Lord for guidance, that prayer, I thought that fit. And the sense of sacred space, I thought that was so deep. I wanted to tell you, so I looked into the name Catherine because you had this idea of Saint Clair, and in French, Claire is clair. It means clear. It can also mean pure, pure water, clear water, right? And when I looked up Saint Catherine, Catherine is a girl's name that means pure. And so I thought it was really nice that you have these 2 saints, and both names that you're hearing mean pure right at their root. So I thought that was actually really good data because it's about the purity of the water that's being put in. You had this continuation of an ancient ritual. I thought that was really good data. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about this, but there are 2 things that I want to hit a little bit harder. This idea of hiding evil deeds with good deeds and deed laundering. And I thought that was really interesting because he's doing these 3 things. He's shouting at the one, saying mean things, and then he's going back into the love and the gratitude. And so that's kind of this exchanging of the intent. And then AOL Scientology. I don't know how familiar people are with Scientology, but they, in their inner, I don't want to say too much, but I do know, it's common knowledge, but I know that some people can be sensitive when you talk about Scientology. But there is that, remote viewing has some links to Scientology and links to how do you use intent, right? And emotion and all these different things and psi and that kind of stuff. So I actually thought that this good data, this AOL. So Jeff, do you want to tell me a little bit about the data here?
So I think in terms of my previous drawing of the good and the bad coming together or coming from the same source. So that's, I think, coming across again in hiding evil deeds with good deeds. So that's basically saying the intention for the good and the evil both came from the same person. So they had the same source. And so
yes,
That's really cool.
And the continuation of the ancient ritual. How did that come through for you?
So if you look at the rest of the data around that, it was really almost sort of a black magic sort of thing. It was like putting your intention either for good or bad into things. And so it sort of fits, but it also comes across in, I don't know what to say about it. It seems like that would be one bowl of rice, not all three.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I thought that the asking the Lord for guidance, I really like that data point with the 3 jars. I'm just seeing something in chat, David. There's something you're bringing up to me.
Yeah, if you have a second. So from YouTube, are possible, ask a question. What's that?
Hello, are possible.
Oh, right. Hello. Conceptually, should there be mention of the processes of fermentation or basically preservation versus decomposition? Good bacteria versus bad bacteria. Can remote viewing connect with the life in the microscopic realm? So it's basically a question around what remote viewing is capable of doing.
I think definitely there was, and we're going to see it later as well. There's the anthropomorphization of the rice as entities, as beings, as people, and it's really fascinating when we get to those slides. But I think that process of fermentation, preservation versus decomposition, and that being the good versus the bad, or the light versus the dark, life versus death. So I think definitely. That's what the remote viewers are picking up on, and that's the magic, I think, of remote viewing, is when it can take it that step further and go into that level of detail.
Yeah, it also, from my perspective, it's totally possible. It depends on the viewer, depends on their predispositions, but it also depends on the tasking. So if that component was really of high value to the person who was tasking the target, they could narrow down the scope of focus more in that direction so that the viewers in general would likely pull the data. However, some viewers, just because of the way their mind works, may instantly go down that path and pull a lot of complex details in association with those aspects, whereas somebody else is not as interested in that, so they pull other details. So, but it is totally possible. It's just about sort of the composition of viewers and the way the questions are asked, essentially, in my opinion.
Also, I'm glad we have people here from YouTube. Welcome, and thank you for joining. And Chris, I just saw your message about the yin yang. It's coming. I didn't forget you. So yeah, I'm gonna go to the next slide. And so here, I thought this was, again, so we're looking at how is someone going to represent something like this as structures and landscapes because of the CRV or the HRVG templates. And here we have Chris, who did such a wonderful job of this. He has the 3 structures, the 3 jars of rice, and the human. And again, it was, who was it that had the human in close proximity? Yes. Yeah. And so I think as well, we're seeing that here where there's a human and the human is connected. He's on a spiral with these three structures, the 3 jars of rice. I think that there's something in there about that energetic flow moving through all 3. And I really did think it was a nice parallel to Jeff's 3 jars as well. He's describing here 3 arcs. I think it's that relationship between them and the relationship between them and then the human. And you can see in Chris's session, at the beginning of his session and his visits, he's already kind of getting this idea that there are these 3 things that are significant, right? And his first visit, it comes through. His second visit, it comes through. And so I thought it was really nice to see how then later in his session, he's able to expand that outwards and find these 3 structures. And I just thought that was really relevant. So good job, Chris, who's in the chat. And Jeff as well. I thought that was really nice parallel there. And so here we have data about the chanting, saying prayers, talking in a foreign language, singing music. Claudia, you can jump in here because you heard singing and music. And I think I have you muted because I think there was a little bit of noise coming in from your mic. So there you are, you're unmuted. And we have Karen, you heard moaning from someone, very quiet. And so all of these people here on this side who all heard the voices, I'd love for you guys to talk. And Patrick, Dutch Patrick, who had the whispering voices and fireworks starting, hiss and voices. Would you guys talk about how that came through? Did it come through as audio? Did it come through as a feeling?
Audio.
Okay.
Really, yeah. But sometimes you hear something, but you cannot really analyze what it is. So.
Yes.
But I heard the voice, for sure.
Nice. Claudia, how did that come through for you?
Oh, it's time back, but yeah, also audio. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, sorry, I skipped out because my phone was overheated and it stopped.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
Okay.
I get a small sound when someone joins back in, so it lets me know. And Jeff, what about you? Because you heard someone talking a foreign language. I thought that was really fascinating.
That was definitely audio. The other thing that you have there was my attempt to draw something that was like hieroglyphics. And that came through in a very odd way. It was like I was touching carvings in stone.
Wow.
And it was like, okay, there's different symbols here. I don't know what they mean. And it was just kind of, that's what I drew. So that was actually tactile, which is kind of weird.
And it's funny because I was looking at Korean text and Japanese text, and there's some similarity there in the style of figures that you have. And Karen, why don't you tell us a little bit about how it came through for you?
Yeah, it was also audio for me, but also emotions I felt, like cold, alone, can't move, hurting, afraid, lost, and someone, and then the noise. So it's mixed with emotions.
Yes. Yeah, that's powerful when you can get the feel of the data and identify it really precisely. I think that's it's a really good skill level. Yeah.
Okay.
And we also had Chris, who identified that it was Oriental or Asian, China, Japan, and of course, Dr. Emoto's Japanese. So I thought that was good data. And he got the word iconic. I thought that was fantastic. That's a great word. And I think it describes him very well. David, do you want to say a few things about Dr. Emoto in terms of how he is an icon in his field?
Well, I think the other day when we were doing research, I saw that he was I think it was 2012. I think he died in 2014. He was ranked number 8 as the top 8th, like spiritual kind of individual leader, icon, that kind of thing. So, and he had met with the Dalai Lama and other celebrities. So he definitely was recognized in a way that other scientists are not necessarily recognized in their fields, in the context of being more of a spiritual nature kind of thing. So, yeah, I think that this fits.
And so Cody had, again, that religious feel to the data that I thought was good data. And both Jeff and Claudia had that sense of a treasure. And I think that fits with the golden rice, with the fermented rice, with something that's precious and that you're feeling gratitude towards or for. So I actually thought that was good data. And then Jeff, again, your metaphors, I do enjoy decoding them. Because there were two things that I really loved about these two pieces of data. First, you had a human who made the human, and that idea of creation and speaking something into existence. And we're talking about using intent to either kill the rice or to preserve it, like our possible was saying, right? You're preserving it, you're keeping it alive in a way, you're keeping it healthy. And so I thought that was really good data, that you're touching on something that speaks to what it is that allows us to live, that energy that differentiates between life and death. And I thought that was really good. And then you said this, and I actually do see, I think it's complex, but I do see it as being there. Something like a living toy. Happiness is doing what the master asks. Now, Dr. Emoto is treating the rice. And again, you had that conflict about something your subconscious wasn't really happy with this experiment. And I feel the same. When I see this experiment, it hurts me to see all these people on YouTube being mean to the rice when we know now that the rice is affected by it. So you're saying mean things, you're shouting, you're hating the rice, the poor rice that didn't do anything to deserve that, and reality itself, right? And so that idea of you're treating it like a toy, you're not thinking about how that's impacting the rice. In fact, you want the rice to die because that proves that this works. And so that idea of I think maybe the terrible nature of this experiment in this, from the perspective of the rice, that we're just treating the rice as though we don't really care. It's a toy, we're going to use it. And that the rice is basically saying, well, whatever the master is asking, whatever Dr. Emoto is imposing on me, that's my reality. And I have to please him and do what his intent is wanting. So I thought there was something really deep there. What did you think about that?
I'm not. I wish it would have come across completely in that context. It came across in a different way, but that's how my data is all the time. It's hard to know what to attribute to what. So I love your interpretation, and I think that part's spot on. Yes.
I think, and we're going to see this, I think, in the next slide or two, the personification of the rice, taking the rice as humans and then trying to make sense of that. And I think that was the first example of that happening. But first we have to talk about this, because I was talking to Cody, and like I said earlier, because Cody can't be here, he might join us later, but I did record some footage with him because I think he did really well on the astronomical compendium that we're going to be covering next. But here we have Cody, who saw some religious dude holding some kind of a staff, wearing this funny little pyramid-like hat on his head with these weird shoulders and these little short little bell legs. And Dutch Patrick, you also have a figure in some kind of a hat with the little legs sticking out here. And when I looked into Dr. Emoto, the Shinto priests were working with him and were supporting his research into effects of intention. And this is what they look like. It's such a perfect match. So I wanted, because we don't have Cody here yet, but Dutch Patrick, did you want to say something about this?
It isn't one of my best drawings, but it's a figure. Yeah. I drew the kind of basic shapes of the individual.
I think that's the thing with remote viewing. When you're in the session, sometimes it's hard to know what is the most important thing, right? So you kind of see this figure and you're like, okay, there's this figure with a weird hat. after you get the reveal, sometimes you think, oh, I wish I would have expanded that further, right?
Yeah.
I've had that happen as well. It's always the sessions where I use stick figures that all of a sudden the figure is really important. But I really
Usually it's later the last part of the protocol. So sometimes also have concentration problems. So and
yes,
it's all about time, doing it quickly. And you
yeah.
can go in depth on all the things you experience, all the data. So
Yeah, you start getting tired by the end, and that's when you're getting the best data, and that's when you're most mentally exhausted.
exactly.
Yeah. So, but I did think that the parallel there was really fantastic. And Cody, I just thought that was amazing for remote viewing, that he was able to get such precise details. Yeah, I was really impressed by that. And then here we have Claudia, one of a kind, something that humanity needs this. I thought that was really, really fascinating. And again, you had the sense of like the holy place of worship. I think that's good data. And the names of Einstein and Da Vinci, Einstein works with energy and physics, and Da Vinci, he studied the natural world and tried to make sense of it. And I think that putting those two names together, that idea of you're looking at the physics and energy and its application to the natural world, I thought that was really good data. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about what you were feeling in the data that you have here. And you're on mute, so I'm going to unmute you. There you go.
Yeah. Well, I had the idea that it had to do with someone important who did something, who made something. He had to do with it. So therefore, these two names. But this is also in the end from the summary, right? So then I basically I write things automatically. So it's not just that I'm very much aware of what's coming up. So
that's interesting. David and I have been talking about that a little bit as well. Did you want to say a few things about that, David, or?
Not at this time, because I don't want to take too much time away from the focus here. But just in a summary would be is that automatic writing may be a key component that has not been fully realized within the remote viewing community in terms of its potential. Let's put it that way, in a way to concisely state the information.
So Claudia, I think it's fantastic that you use that kind of automatic writing in your summary. Last month, I expressed that I think a lot of the summaries are to some extent unnecessary. Sometimes I think they bias the viewer and actually hinder their progress of their development within their session, because they're thinking about the summary throughout.
Yeah.
But here you're using it in a very different way. If you're doing automatic writing in your summary, I think that's a fantastic use of the summary, is to kind of, because at that point you're in the flow and you're in the signal. And so, yeah, I thought that's really fascinating.
Yes, that's what you say. You are in a flow, and then something comes up which you beforehand not realized.
Yes. Yeah. And the idea of humanity needing this, I think that's important. I think we need to think about this. What are you saying to people? Are you on YouTube telling people that they're stupid? What effect does that have in the world in general? I think these are good things to think about. And then Chris had mentioned in the chat, he had this AOL of the yin yang. And I think that, that goes with Jeff's data with the one stream flowing into two. It goes with Dutch Patrick's flowing figure 8. So yeah, I think that was good data as well. And then here, so Jeff, we talk a lot about metaphor in your work. I actually think this clash of cultures between the shaman and the politician, you have Dr. Emoto saying the gratitude and the nice things and doing the magic with the good rice, and it's all preserved. And then he's also neglecting the other rice, and he's presenting this to the public, and that idea of a demonstration. And so I can kind of see that sense of the politician shaman kind of coming together. So I thought that was interesting data in your session. Did you want to talk a little bit about some of the data that you had here?
So you had, I'll just add that you had retasked a separate section, an additional session for me on this topic. And that was really the primary theme of the whole next session, was the, in a sense, two different groups, two different archetypes, both depending upon each other to get to where they're going. So it's sort of a without darkness, you can't have light. Without light, you can't have darkness sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating, really good data. Even the idea that you have he's a skilled mediator, I think that I see that the metaphor, the kind of thing you're touching upon and how it relates to this. And Dr. Patrick, you had the influence on human behavior. That was such a strong data point, because as much as we can intend to shape the outcomes for the rice, Dr. Emoto was doing this to show the impact on children. That was, I think, part of what he talks about in the interviews on the rice experiment was, if you're shouting at your children, what effect are you having on their growth and development? And so I thought that was really relevant. Yeah, so that's what I saw there. And then here, so here just some of the data points that have to do with the hate that maybe people are picking up on Dr. Emoto saying, attacking here, attacking the rice. Even this from Cody, rocking forward motion, like your head is bobbing forward. I think, if you're shouting at the rice or really being mean. And, Jeff, you're uncomfortable being around this man, dark, evil side. Definitely that's good data. Absolute power corrupts. So that idea of he's taking this power and he's using it to kill this rice. And then Chris, spiky, dangerous, pointy. So I think that all kind of fits with the hatred. And then everybody picks up on water, and mostly salt water. And so I thought that was interesting as well. Everyone's feeling it humid, wet, ocean, salty. So that was really nice to see. And then some of you picked up on the moldy. So Claudia, you had the moldy smell. So that was really good data. And then you also had the awe, respect, peaceful silence. So again, when you're doing a simple session, you're trying to figure out how do all these things come together. And as a remote viewer, don't worry about it. The analyst's job is to see what goes with what, right? And so I think that's the good viewer is able to just say, at this part, it's moldy, and at this part, it's not. Here it's clean, and here it's dirty, and just trust it. And then Jeff, you have the just sitting content and bored, no treasure. I really saw that as the neglected rice. So I thought that was kind of funny how that came through. That was nice. This I would like, please do pipe up and feel free to talk to me about what you guys were seeing here, because everyone nearly had these really similar motifs. This sort of reflection on a ball, says Jeff. And then Cody, illuminated towards the front. Michael, you had the view from inside a cylinder, microscope. That's fantastic data. You're looking in at the rice, those little tiny things, and you're seeing them in a cylinder. So that was amazing. For Claudia, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just looking at this, and then the previous image I had of the matrix with the rays coming out. I was almost just looking at this data after the reveal and just superimposing them on it. I almost felt like I was viewing from the perspective of the rice, that I was looking up at the exit to the glass itself, and this information was coming in. So that just kind of came alive me with that.
Yes. You and Cody, I think, both did the same. You both took the perspective of the rice in the jar at parts of your sessions, and it was really wonderful to see. Yeah. Anyone? Yeah, here's Cody, curved above narrow, so he's seeing himself in the jar. So I think that was the rice. And so again, here we have all the fungus, mushroom, dark, dusty, grayish, and this is the word catacombs. Catacombs. The idea that the rice is being taken as a conscious entity and it's dead. So you have all these dead pieces of rice. And so again, I thought that was really intriguing to see that empathy when the remote viewer empathizes so much with the target that they become part of the target. And in this case, you become the rice because that's what's being affected. And that's a really good way of getting data, is to try to get into the thing that you're describing. So Cody also had that there's a different purpose, right? That there's the 3 jars and then there's scattered position. Karen, you drew the rotting rice, and you were talking earlier about the emotions, alone, hurt, lying in the sand. I think that's what you were doing. I think you were taking the perspective of the rice. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, about how that felt and your piece of rotting rice?
Muted.
Oh, are you muted? I'll unmute you, Karen. There you go.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I felt. That's the best thing when I do a target. The feeling I get very good, and what I said, a cold, alone. I need help. It's difficult to find me, and I'm hurting. And I also had that he went away again. That he came. I thought I get help, and then he gone. Yeah, and the rice, yeah, I thought it was wood because I had a AOL, but I saw the molds, and it was old, and it was black and white, and yeah. But the feeling I get very good, but yeah. The surroundings, it's difficult for me.
You got good data. This was good data. You had the moldy rice. And I just really love that you had that empathy and that ability to go in and experience the target from the perspective of the rice and to feel it. It feels alone. It feels hurt. That's fantastic. And for a remote viewer, that's a really good skill. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So I thought that was really good. And a lot of people did see it as wood. I think that makes sense, right? It's organic, it's natural, it's kind of that beigey color. So I thought that made sense to see it in a lot of people's work. And, leaf litter, foliage, leaves on the ground, that also came through in most people's sessions. The idea of a harvest, that came through the word harvest, both in Jeff and Dutch Patrick. Patrick, you also had the morning dew. I thought that was really good data as well because it's the liquid and that's pure. So here is the bias of trying to find a structure and a landscape in a target that doesn't need to be described in that way. And so we see there's the jar that's coming through as a structure, and there's the water, right? And here it's coming through as sand traps, and here it's maybe more abstract. Feels like the structure is overlooking the water, right? So, and it's not a bad thing. Because as an analyst, you know what you're looking at. The structure, okay, that's the jar, and there's water around it, and these sand traps. I can be like, yeah, okay, these are the pieces of rice, and I can see that. And so it's not a bad thing, but it is something to, I think about when we do our sessions, because everybody did try to draw a landscape from the data, which of course you do because that's the protocol. That's where it takes you. Here we have Cody and Michael. He's kind of describing what you were saying. He's viewing it from the other end, looking out, and he even wrote that there in the bottom. And the 3 jars are represented, but you can see that he's put himself in the position of the rice in the jar and the energy coming towards it. So I thought that was really good. And then here's just a bit of a, the shapes, the tubular shapes that kind of came through the shape of the rice in the different sessions. The sounds, one of the aspects of this is that I think he timed it so that I think he was shouting or hating the rice for 2 minutes and loving the rice for 2 minutes because it was a scientific experiment. So there was that aspect of time, and that did come through. And here's just more of the personification of the rice, and I thought that was really good. So Jeff feels that he's in a small room and is claustrophobic. Great data. And Michael also says he feels like he's crammed up. He feels claustrophobic. So you both use the same word, and so I thought that's fantastic. Jeff again here, he's lots of people in a small room, so all these little pieces of rice. I think that works really well with Cody's catacombs, and Karen, your emotions that you're feeling of the rice. So I think everyone used that technique really well to get good data. And then here's the timing. So people picked up on the idea of a clock tower, spinning the arrow, the clock hands, that kind of seemed to come through in people's data. And so here, Jeff, I put this as my last slide because you were saying you thought the target is not the ship that you've been describing in that section of your session. You're recognizing that the ship is a metaphor. And I think that's really powerful that you're able in the session to say, yeah, this is a metaphor. And that you're able to see the executives are on top, the blue collar workers are below. They need each other to get to where they're going. And so, I was kind of thinking about this and how it comes through. And are those people who are expressing will and intention and shaping the world around them? Are they the executives? And then the blue collar workers, are those just the bits of matter that we're affecting? And that we have to work together, that our intention works with the matter around us to kind of make the world that we live in. I think that's an interesting thought to kind of explore. So that's it for that target. The second one is a lot shorter, but let's say hello to everyone, see all your little faces. How did you guys feel about that overall?
It's good. Good target. Great data by everybody as well.
Yeah, I agree. You guys got amazing data. So what was your experience of it? You're happy with the target, with the data that you got?
I appreciate working as a group and seeing the things that are common among everyone. So that makes me feel a lot better about my data being on target when other people get the same thing.
Yeah.
I also wonder if the results are influenced by your intention, Sasha, to obtain metaphorical or conceptual data. I wonder.
I do too. Yeah. And what do you think about that? Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Does it help? Does it hinder?
No, I don't think it matters. What I find interesting that it might be possible to influence the data from the viewer apparently with intentions.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
I think so too. I think you're right about that. I think that the role of the tasker, a lot of people think the tasker is just the poor person who doesn't get to remote view this week. And so they have to slap something together and find a random number to put on the page. But I think that can be what a tasker is. And I think too often it is. But I think the tasker can play a more significant role in trying to help the viewers, I guess, get their best data, right?
It's an opportunity for a tasker to kind of go to play with a cue and kind of go, if I lean it this way, where do they go? And if I lean it that way, where do they go? So there's information to be gathered from that. There's valuable kind of insights to get, because you can, when you are viewing yourself, when you take that on board, I think it makes you a better viewer because your lens changes, but also gives you clues and insights into how people go after information. Is it random? Is it kind of directed? Can you lead? You could write a little paper on that.
Definitely. Yeah. And Michael, I think for you, your grid with the things coming out of it, stand alone, you might look at that and think, is that good data? But then when you see it alongside Dutch Patrick's data, then you're like, oh, yes, I see, right? And then I think that's the importance of doing group work and of sharing our results together, right? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, it's really good training as a group for doing targets if you don't have any idea what the information is. Like if there wasn't a reveal at the end, like maybe I could try and pick out bits of information here or there if I was like doing my own debriefing on it. But yeah, I feel like doing group work in that sense, learning to see things from other angles intrinsically as a reviewing session, as opposed to like just like having the the hard data like objective feedback with the actual reveal itself, having to like circumscribe all of my process for figuring things out. Yeah, I think it's pretty util that way.
Yeah.
Sasha, did you do analysis training with Glenn and Sita?
I did, yes, and I did their analysis for some targets that I had done for the Looking Glass group. I had acted as tasker and analyst, but I found their method didn't work as well. I'm very creative, and also I use Psi in my analysis in a way that other people don't. And so I think I'm working on a book to share the method that I use, because I think having someone with Psi ability, having someone who's a good remote viewer do the analysis and be able to allow that to come through, I think that's important, and it's something no one talks about. David, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just from working with Sasha, her ability to basically pattern match information across a very broad spectrum rapidly and pull it together, and also pulling from a lexicon of research that she's done. So like one example was because there was an expert in Scranton, Laird Scranton, who's an expert on like ancient stuff, basically archaeology, things like that, history, cultures. Sasha had already picked out something in one of my sessions that I had done in CRV, and I was like, I kind of see what you're saying, like the analytics, right? It's kind of I can, because sometimes with the remote viewing, you're trying to understand, like, for me, I'm just talking for me personally, I need to see sort of a series of steps that help me get to the point where the analyst is going like, it's this. And if I can see all those steps or enough of those steps, I go, yeah, I see it too, like real obvious. But if there's too much, like, it's basically points of reference. Like she has more points of reference on that particular topic than I do. So she's like, oh, this thing you did is this thing here. And I'm like, I kind of see that, but I would need to see more data. I feel like I need more data that I would write down that would really encapsulate it, right? So, but I believe her because I've seen her do stuff where it's like, it's amazing for an analyst, analytics. And Scranton, we had a private conversation with him. I mean, he came in, we interviewed him, and then afterward we had a bunch of exchanges, and she didn't say this to him, but he figured it out on his own. He correlated the exact same piece of data through analytics. He's an expert on the topic. I was like, whoa. So that to me was like really cool to see. So yeah, her analytics is very interesting, and her ability to do that. Yeah, I don't see anybody else who can do it personally.
Yeah, your analytics is really, it's impressive, very good. And as we were talking about James, like, he says, like, I mean, remote viewing, all the concentrations on the viewing, and he said, like, I mean, it's a 3-part process: setting up the target, doing the target, and analyzing the target. And the 3 of them need work.
Yeah.
You're very weak if you don't have knowledge on all of those.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, Sasha and I talk about that all the time. It's one of the things I feel is very absent from the community is the emphasis on the analytics. Is you can have, like I think I said in the Dames interview, it's like, unless the viewer is going to draw the photo, because it happens to be a photo target, right? There's a whole bunch of things that have to line up, but it's like, if they a picture perfect representation of the target, then everybody who's not an analyst goes, wow, amazing, great job. And that's great, it is, right? But there's all this other rich data, right? And it's like, if you don't understand what you're looking at, it just gets lost. So that's where the analytics is so critical.
And even like, even asking a question of a person's mind you know, like, I mean, I look at a lot of what people task, and I know it myself because I practiced. I'm doing it for years with our Facebook group, and I've asked some things, and I will look at the results that come back, and I might go back and task a different, similar target, but ask it slightly different and see what comes back. And because I know from working hypnotically with people in the past, like, you ask something and you could get a very different response than what you've asked for. And so you have to look at what did I just ask that person to do, leading wise, or what presuppositions are in the language I just used, and it makes you more precise. And it turns out to be the same when you're asking like something in divination. If you don't ask, like, you'll always get the answer to the question, but it may not be the question you've asked, like, and so when you start to tidy that up and get a bit more precise in what you're asking, you get better. I think you can guide a person better,
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, because Sasha and I have had similar discussions, and even some of our experimentation with tasking matches what you're describing. It is fascinating. I mean, if you're really interested in this topic, it's extremely interesting to see the type of details that can, exactly what you said, skew things in a certain direction where you're like, wow, like you really get the data you want, whereas other stuff is too broad because you just asked too broad of a question. You weren't really thinking about it, or you weren't clear. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And it's nice, as an analyst, it's crucial for me to get to know the viewers, right? So because I'm retasking, and so it helps me to know, what is this viewer capable of? What are his strengths? What kind of data is he going to better enjoy getting? And so then in the retask, I'm going to say, okay, well, let's go do that. Let's explore your strengths and get data that you're going to find interesting, or what's something in your session that you touched upon that I think you're able to bring me more data about, right? And so I think that's where that component comes in of knowing the tasker, and the tasker knowing the remote viewer. And so I think that there's value in that. Yeah, I have to say though about David's story, it did feel good to, sometimes I'm trying to explain things, and it's hard for me sometimes to always communicate the underlying steps that got me from here to there, or it's so complex and there's all these, it's embedded in all these different layers, and it's metaphorical, there's conceptual stuff, and I'm trying to lay it out and trying to do it not really concisely, because I'm not able to do that, but I try. And it's just kind of funny. Well, sometimes, David is trying to be polite and okay, maybe I see it, but I know he's like, no, like, what are you saying, Sasha? And it felt so good to have the expert come in and say, oh, I see this, and it validated me so well. And yeah, that felt good. I do have to admit. But now David and I know each other, and so he trusts, and I never try to go beyond the bounds. I'm never trying to push it beyond what I'm really seeing, right? And so I'm really careful. And so I think that's the thing with the trust. And so, yeah, so I'm trying to put something together, a book together, to help other people make use of their psi and their remote viewing skills to be able to do better analysis. I think that I'm hoping that will be helpful for people. So now we're going to jump into the second target. It's a it's a lot shorter. It's a simpler target. There's not as much conceptual data at all, because I wanted to have something for both groups. And so, shall we jump into that?
Yep, sounds good.
And people in chat, feel free to start asking questions, and we'll address them at the end, I think. So, okay. Are we seeing my astrological compendium?
Yep.
Perfect. So the second target was this astrological compendium, which is kept in the British Museum. And in the retask, I didn't have one retask for everyone. This one I really did tailor it to specific people and to their specific sessions. And I was just trying to get more data. It's a beautiful object, and I'll put the link to it down below in the comments section under the video. A little bit about what it is. Basically, it's an instrument that carries different tools and devices to tell the time, to perform astronomical calculations. You use it to see where you are based on the stars. You use it to find stars in the sky and to identify them. They were made more so in Germany, but some were also made in France in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. They are beautiful objects, very detailed, just magnificent objects of art that are also useful, usually made of brass. They usually have a sundial and then different ways to track the moon's motions, the sun's motion. They have a compass, all this table of latitudes so that you can figure out where you are, where a star is, where the sun and moon are, just using this little device. And so they're just, I just think they're absolutely beautiful. And so I was hoping Cody would be here by now, but I don't know if he's going to be able to make it. But so this was very early in his session. He's questioning what the purpose of this thing is. I love that he saw something, just this, and just sketched it out. Concentric rings, blue, and he's saying, okay, this is something important enough that it has a purpose. What is its purpose? And he got location as the purpose. And I mean, that's exactly what these things do. You find your location based on the stars, or you find the stars' location based on where you are. And so it was so early in his session to really encapsulate the purpose of the device. I thought that was fantastic. And the blue color, I really do see that as being because you're looking at the sky, and it has to do with the location in the sky. So I thought that was actually really good data. I thought that was fantastic. And also he had the word observation in relation to this. And in terms of physical descriptors, Irish Patrick, you have that it's curved object, that it's circular. And Dutch Patrick, you also have this round shape with clasps or something, I think, and process of a man-made. And Dutch Patrick, I really saw this cosmos on a micro scale. That's fantastic. That's exactly what this is. This is a device that holds the cosmos in this little handheld device. So I thought that was such an amazing. You have it as an AOL, but it's not. It's the data that's coming through, and it's telling you exactly what the device is. So I thought that was
wasn't an
fantastic.
AOL.
No, not at all. And so how did you feel when you were what were you seeing? Because it's such good data.
Well, I just drew the shape, but as you can see in the other small picture, I had also a feeling that it was a project of nature. Some process, but then on from something bigger, but then on a micro scale.
Yeah, I thought that was really good data. That was really, really interesting to see. And Chris had these tracks coming through, and I think that was a physical description of the device. They are very complex, and they come in different shapes, but they're all pretty much handheld, so they're all pretty much the same size. But there are variations. So there's a few of these. There's hexagons, octagons, and rectangular ones. And Cody has this blank map. That's kind of what this is. It is kind of a blank map, because it doesn't matter where you are in Europe, the Middle East, or Asia. You can use this device, and it has your city, or it has your latitudes, and tells you where to look to find the stars, or to find the star rising, or the sun rising in a certain constellation. So all this data is all in there. And so I think that Cody did a really good job of showing the compendium. I thought that was really nice, and that it feels like a maze. I thought that was really good data as well. That was really, I liked that. And that he felt that it has something to do with wealth or power. He had the word old rich. And I loved this. He had the word ruler in association with this having to do with wealth and power. And of course, yes, a ruler, a king, would have had a compendium like this. But also rulers are used to measure things. And so I thought that was just such a nice play on words, I guess, or I just thought that was a nice term. Rather than saying king, it came through as ruler. And I thought, yeah, that's nice, flexible meaning of the word. And I do encourage people to look into these because they're so beautiful. Anyway.
Yeah.
And so Dutch Patrick I do think here you have a combination of different elements that you're trying to kind of put together. And I think together they do describe the compendium. So I thought that was a good sketch of, it's like a deconstruction of the device. Cody had that it was built maybe 150 years ago. And David, you had brought up that the British Museum, I think, was maybe more in that time span.
Yeah, it was 100 years younger, so it was like 1750 or something.
Okay. And so I thought that was good data. And again, here's this conceptual data coming through in a CRV session from a viewer who gets conceptual data and is trying to fit it into his session. And so he felt the structure was used in the past and isn't used for anything now but tourism. And that's precisely, that's a precise description of the object. So that was really good to see. And then this was on one of his early pages, I think. And it's a perfect little sketch of the device. So I thought that was amazing. And that he colored it in gold. Yeah. And there's value in using color in your sessions because it just stood out so much more than if it had just been, I think, pencil or pen on paper. The sundial. So this little bit in the bottom of the compendium is a sundial, acts as a sundial. And, most people picked up on that. Again, Cody he even has the shadow on it. He has the sense that it's in an enclosed area, that it's not outside in the middle of a garden or something, right? He has this like maze-like structure around it. And I thought that was fantastic data about the context that he's finding this sundial in, and he named it. So I thought that was amazing. Michael, I think you also were describing this sundial, and I love that you have this little thing, and the flower sun, it's not too clear, but I think you can interpret it as it's pointing up to the sun. And so I thought that was fantastic. A nice little hit there.
I did notice it did look like the direction was like upwards. That was directing it in a counterclockwise direction. So I'm not sure if that was like correct or off or whatever, but if it was off, it could just be an artifact of like that I'm right-handed, and that's what feels like most natural for me to just like draw. So
yes,
it's another thing to keep in mind, I think, when it comes to visually transcribing information.
Definitely.
Could be the numbers. I can't tell. Around the ring might be counterclockwise or have an orientation.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, because the shadow moves. Yes, I don't, but yeah, I know what you're saying. Chris also got pointy, long, high, triangular. So he's also picking up on this, and it came through earlier in his session in a rougher form. And then later it came through more refined. Dutch Patrick, I think you also had this very similar pyramidal structure with the eye. And so again, I think that related to this. So I thought that was good data. And again, Patrick, you have that shape, that central point. I could see the correlation there, and I thought that was good. And Irish Patrick, you had that idea of connected points, and I think that fit. And then Cody gives us the central position. It's triangular and has a circular base. And you guys, I think you can see here, right, that there's this triangle in the center of it. So some people were picking up on that. This is in the British Museum. This is one of the halls, and Cody describes this circular structure. And I just thought that was really good because often when you see a building, you understand that buildings are rectangular. Therefore, you might draw it as a rectangle because that's how you understand buildings are. But he was able to not apply that bias, not interpret it. He saw it as circular and he drew it as circular. And I just thought that was fantastic because it really describes this area so nicely. And the ceiling here is glass, and you can see the sky through it. And he has this circular building here, and he's pointing to the space and the air and the clouds above it. And so I thought that was fantastic for target contact. I thought that was really, really amazing. And then here, Irish Patrick. I think you were picking up on, again, so we're the cosmic shift. We're looking at the stars, we're measuring them, we're measuring ourselves in relation to it. So did you want to say a little bit about your data here?
Yeah, again, it's one of those things. I was kind of wondering where I was, but I knew that that aspect was connected to it somehow. I was kind of, you know, I mean, the device itself, I mean, I could feel the solidity of the device, but I was getting the kind of abstract nature of what it was, and like that had kind of a cosmic element to it. This bottom one here, it was kind of, you see, sometimes if you don't have the language for something, if you don't have the lexicon, you can't get it out, you know. But it was kind of connected points, like kind of being here and there, or you know, this kind of idea of two places at once, that kind of thing, or you know, like a kind of even transporting or something. So I'm not sure overall, but I just thought that there was that kind of connection to it, maybe cosmic or you know, like the astrological idea of it here now is starting to make sense to what I was trying to make sense of, you know.
Yeah.
Because there is that balancing act of kind of, what have I got? What can I actually stick my pen on paper and say, okay, I know that's there. And then if I drift too far from it, you know, I could go into, you know, dangerous territory. So it's kind of.
But if you think as well how these were used and who they were used by the elite, by very wealthy, noble aristocrats. And then how are they used? It's like you're saying, you know, in those days, astrology and astronomy, they're a little bit more connected. And right, the occult, the practices and rituals of the occult groups were maybe more tied in. So they're tied into the elite, tied into astronomy. And so the idea of a device like this being used in different practices, I think it's not a stretch. So I thought that was.
No. I mean, I've read that in so many books, like back in like the 1600s. Like, I mean, astrology, alchemy, and you know, they were kindred spirits.
Yes.
With the kind of magical practices at the time, they were not separate, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not a stretch when these guys are creating and making things like this. Is what they like. We can look at it nowadays and say it's quite primitive, and this is what they were doing because we're putting a kind of our scientific hat on. But I mean, these guys they were broader thinkers than we are.
Yes.
And they would have had a lot more influences, and they were much more open to this kind of, you know, worldview.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
you know, the magic and the occult was not, you know, wasn't something, you know, like, I mean, nowadays we don't, you know, we don't look at it in the same way. We don't look at it as scientific approach, but it was back in those days.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Back in those days, they're trying to understand what science is. It's more like science is coming out of the occult and all the rest of it, right? So it's sort of just starting to emerge as a separate thing. But there's a time frame when they're kind of mixed together.
Yes, definitely. And that is the time, right? And yeah.
But look at, I mean, look at all the literature that's there. The amount of people that were practicing, the famous names, there were so many of them. But then we entered this kind of, you know, we went from the kind of Middle Ages to the Renaissance to this Enlightenment stage, and then the scientific protocols and the scientific mindset came on. And so the rest of it just got, you know, was primitive then, you know, it was.
Yes.
But I mean, there were a lot of models. There was a lot of effectiveness in what they'd done for their time with it. And some would say, you know, much more effective.
Yeah, I think so.
Certainly more in tune with nature and reality, I think, than we are now.
Yeah, I think so too. So I thought that was good data. And then here as well, I thought that was a fantastic sketch. Just outstanding. You have the person looking to the location through this kind of Stargate thing. That's exactly what this is, right? Because you're looking through the astrolabe to find the location of the stars. So that was perfect.
Cool.
Yeah. And then we're back to Cody again. He has, and this ties into what we're talking about, these elite and the kind of people who would have had one of these. He sees the the patterned floor, the chessboard floor. I'm not sure if it ties into the British Museum, because that would have been a place where these kinds of, Freemasons, they would have been the ones funding it and meeting there and being part of the governing of the institution, or if it has maybe more to do with this particular compendium and the owner and how it was used. But he did pick up that it was in England. He had this structure that I think the columns, I think that's a really good representation of the British Museum that you see here. He had the Vatican City after England, so there was kind of that question. I think these buildings are something that you would expect to see in the Vatican. So I could see if he's kind of picking up on this kind of architecture. I think that makes sense as a data point that comes through. What I really liked is that he had the sense of feeling abandoned. And this device was donated to the British Museum. And I love that data point. It just, to me, that's really delightful when data comes through that way, that this object is feeling abandoned because it was kept as a really precious object for probably a really long time by a person who it stays in the family, gets passed down, and then at some point it falls into the hands of this, Sir Franks. He just donates it and moves on with his life. So I thought that was really interesting. And then Dutch Patrick, you had this, and I think this sketch, to me, it was like a kind of, I can see the mirroring of this structure with the columns here around the windows, but also just the general outside of the British Museum with the columns. So I thought that was, yeah, you're picking up, there's target contact there as well. And so that's it for the compendium. So what are your thoughts on that one, especially in relation to the previous one, which was more conceptual, and this one, which was really tangible and an object, not a structure? Was that too challenging? Was that okay? What do you guys think?
I'm always really happy when I get something on a target. So, but yeah, I enjoyed that second one as well. Again, you're trying to twist your mind around what it is, and you're trying to find the words to describe it, and the kind of when you get those little kind of pieces, like the kind of astrological pieces or cosmic pieces, those kind of things, I think it's great when those kind of pop in, because this is hard work, it's not easy at all. Like, we're making it look easy.
Yeah, and you guys all got such great data. So any other comments? Any other questions? Anything you guys wanted to highlight that I missed?
Yes, can I ask something?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, I have two remarks with regards to the jars, because I had in my subject admiring something on display, and I found that's also fitting in, I thought. And then how do you do this with the two targets with regards to one subject? Because that is what I do not understand yet, because you first gave us the U6 blah blah blah, and after that you gave a sub-target.
Yes, a retasking. Yes. So for remote viewing, especially if you're doing project work, you want to be able to get as much data from your viewer as possible, and especially because good viewers are not as common. So when you have good viewers, you really want to be able to get them to give you as much data. And so you give them a tasking. So here's the target. And then you let them work the session. And the way David and I do it is we stay blind throughout the whole project. So other groups, maybe they give front loading or mid loading. This is the category of data that you're trying to go after, or they're unblinded. They're told what the data is, and then they're given a retask, or they're told, give me more about this person that you were mentioning on your third page. But what we do for Magic in the Noise is we stay blind. So I don't give you a category. I don't say, can you give me more about the person? I just give you the target ID for the new tasking. And the new tasking either is, in the case of the rice experiment, the retask was, please give me details emphasizing the physical description of the jars of rice and or of Dr. Emoto himself, right? And so the first one I left more open so that people could explore whatever they found interesting. And then the second one, I narrowed it to like, okay, now that you've had your fun and you've explored, you've got on your little adventure, now give me the physical description, because there was that pushback about the conceptual versus non-conceptual targets. I thought, okay, let's play it out that way. The compendium for that one, because the first target was so cut and dry and there wasn't really that much conceptual to go after, for that one, what I did is, like for Cody, I asked him, tell me more about this little curlicue, this object that you're describing here, give me more details about it. And there was something else in his session that I pointed to as well. And I was like, tell me more about this other thing, right? But I didn't tell him that. I just gave him the code. But I wrote on my tasking document, please give me more about this on this page of your session, right? And so, and then, who are the others? I can't remember who I retasked. Maybe it was Jeff, but basically that's what I do. I go through your session and I kind of say, okay, what would help you get more data that either you haven't already gotten, or if you have already gotten, but not enough of it, and I think you can get more, then that's what I do in the retasking. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. Now it makes sense, because in the first target number, I was, in my opinion, completely off, and in the second, I have this. Well, I went along with you, so no, it's clear now. Thank you.
Yeah, the first target, the rice experiment, was, I think, a little bit more challenging. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so, Karen, what was your experience of it? Because it's your first time joining us.
Mute.
Oh, you're muted. Hold on, I'll unmute you. There you go.
Sorry again. Yeah, I liked it to join all of you and see your results. They're very, what I said, I have only the emotions that I from the target, but then I see that I'm a beginner and you are more experienced. I think.
Yeah, there's different levels. Yeah, and that's okay, right? I'm just gonna. It's okay that there are different levels, and it's okay because everyone contributes data, and your data, where you were empathizing with the rice and telling us how it was feeling, that's great data, and that can help give more perspective, and it strengthens that idea of the other viewers who were viewing it from the perspective of the rice, and so it contributes to that. And so I think that's the value of doing it with a group with different levels, is that you can still bring in brilliant data even if you're maybe less experienced. That doesn't stop you from bringing in brilliant data. So and I think you did do that. So
Yeah, and that process generally tends to others. Somebody with feedback. There we go. That process generally, for my own experience of doing this, kind of going through the same thing over years of time with groups and stuff, is it helps to build strength in your understanding of how this stuff works. And you see in the analysis, like Sasha's showing, but you also see the correlating pieces. So it just makes it more, as a beginner, to me, it made it more real, and it made it sort of accelerate the process for me, improving as I went over time. And it's like looking at a chapter in a book where each viewer might get certain sentences out of that chapter, and then some viewers get the same sentence. So you get like a spread. So you look at the whole thing as a tapestry, you see enough where you can actually read the chapter when you have a group. But that's also the power of the retasking. So if you have an individual, and you can spend enough time doing it, the tasker blindly, in my opinion, is the best way, but others may have a different opinion on that. But essentially using the retasking, and you don't know what you're being asked to retask, you could have a single individual that can actually start to grab, like, oh, the tasker's like, oh, they missed this chunk here. Okay, let's see if I can point their nose right at this chunk and see if they'll get something out of that, right? And so you could do 6 or 7 sessions, and that would be enough, like a whole group would do, if you have a good tasker, and you can kind of follow the cues that you get. Because again, sometimes with that we found like somebody doesn't really like to do a certain kind of thing. That's where Sasha was talking about the relationship. So if she knows that like, oh, this person just really does not like to, I don't know, look at animals or something, and the animal's a key part of the target, it's like probably asking them to point right at the animal, hey, tell me about this, probably not going to do it, right? But if you might be able to get them to tell you other surrounding data that will still kind of get you the result you want, right? So it's sort of like trying to be strategic and creative about how you pull the data and get it together.
Yeah, so I'm very grateful for your participation, Karen and Claudia. Everybody, like obviously, I'm grateful for everyone's participation. It was it really helps. Jeff, do you have some things to say before we close off?
So, I'm not sure what else to say. So I didn't do the second target here. But just as I said before, doing this as a group is so much better than doing it one person at a time.
Yeah, and I like that it does help to see your work expanded upon by others, to see how it makes sense. I think that's useful to learn from as well, because you see how other people are expanding things. So then you think, I like what that person did there. Maybe I'll try that as well. I think that's useful. Michael?
Yeah, I liked having 2 targets. And I just, like, in retrospect, I think, like, I feel like the second target was more of a miss for me, and it feels like some of the things that I was doing in the second target were actually more applicable to the first. I'm not really sure what to make of that, if I'm just like reading into it too much. But yeah, I'm curious to know like what your own thoughts are on that, or like what your own procedures are for kind of like, clearing your own palette, so to speak. I wonder if any of you felt like being able to speak to that.
David, do you want to say something?
Well, I mean, it's a common thing in remote viewing to experience something called displacement, where if you're working 2 targets simultaneously, you can try to get my hands in the 2 targets simultaneously, you can actually kind of like do the first one and you're actually targeting the second one, or you get a mix of the two, so each session has half and half. So this type of thing occurs. It's known as displacement, or it's one of the terms that's used. And the fix for that typically is more remote viewing will solve the problem. You could also work a target in isolation, get feedback, and then move on to the next one, get feedback. That's another way. But there are different like little tricks, but usually more experience over time, you just get, I don't know, like you just sort of adjust to it is one of the things that I've seen. There are some other tricks, but what's your thoughts, Sasha?
Yeah, I agree. I think just with practice, you just learn to your subconscious, your mind, you kind of learn to separate them out. Sometimes you might still, like if you're, I don't know, tired, or if one of them is really super interesting, you might start to, oops, I'm picking up on this thing that I still am curious about. So I think you have to have your own feelings in check, right? So if you're working a target and you're like, oh, this one's super interesting, and then now I'm going to the next one that, this one's maybe less interesting. For me, it's okay, keep your emotions in check. Don't go back to that other one that you want to explore. Like, this is what I'm working, so this is what I have to focus on. It takes time, it takes practice. You work at it and you develop the skill. Yeah. But it is.
I was going to say also, I think I did them within like a half hour of each other too. I think perhaps maybe more temporal displacement would be useful. Like if I just do it on separate days, or like have like a morning and one in the afternoon or something.
One of the things Glenn had said in HRVG, he's like, I would do a target, go watch a movie, because it kind of, and then you can work your next target, because then you're having an adventure, there's emotion, there's things happening, so you're really distancing yourself from the data and the emotion of the first one. So you kind of want that clean slate.
When I had studied my own internal processes through as a beginner doing the remote viewing, one of the things I noticed was precog data, actual stuff in my real life bleeding in as a form of displacement into the session work, which was shocking to me. But when I saw that, watching that pattern, and I think this works for display, what you're describing as well, is that I noticed that when I went to sleep, it tended, like the consciousness, almost like somehow that registered as like a shift or a disconnect from the target that you're actually working on. So it seems like if you're going to do that, I would suggest maybe separating the two time frames of doing the work with the sleep period. You're probably going to decrease your displacement.
Yeah, thanks. I heard you mention the precog thing in the lightning video that was done a while back, and but I found that a very interesting piece. You're saying like how to read parts of that and just like develop a better like screen for like how you're parsing like unconscious data. So
that is a good way. Yeah. And Dutch Patrick?
Yeah, it was fun to do again. So let's keep that up.
Good.
Yeah, it's very, there's a lot of information doing this collectively. That's why we have a little group in the Netherlands as well. To stay contact with the process, stay enthusiast,
I wanted to ask you actually, Dutch Patrick, should we put the link to your group for the Netherlands? Maybe we can put that in the description if you want.
Oh, sure. For the Facebook group, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. And then Irish Patrick?
Yeah, thanks for inviting us on again to work these targets. It's great. I mean, it's good. One of the things that we know with remote viewing is that, the external pressures of doing something, that's going to be viewed by many people adds in that extra level of difficulty. But difficulty is what you want, because, you have to learn to work through it. So, yeah, I mean, I enjoy these. I mean, I really like looking at other people's data because, like, I kind of learned a lot from just what other people are getting, because it's what people focus on, and it's kind of an attractor for you, or else it's kind of your natural thing. Everybody gets different data, and that's why working as a team is great, because then you piece all this together as an analyst, and you get what you want, or you get the answer that you're kind of hopefully vague about. So, I mean, I learned a lot from seeing what people produced here. It's really impressive and, stuff. I mean, you should be proud of what you're doing. It's great. I mean, you're looking at your data. Sometimes you kind of go, oh, I don't know, I mean, no, it's very good to me. It's excellent data,
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. I'm delighted that everyone participated. I'm very grateful. There were other people who participated that I wasn't able to include in the live stream, but I want to thank them as well. I want to thank the people in chat. So It's My Remote Viewing Journey also puts his remote viewing on YouTube. So I am always excited to see people putting their remote viewing work out there publicly. I think that's fantastic. And so It's My Remote Viewing Journey in chat. Check him out. He has a channel. And so I'm glad that he was able to be here. Chris, I'm glad that you were attending even though you're sick. So thank you for following along. And Are Possible, I'm delighted that you were able to make it today. That's fantastic. Really nice insights. The Intuitive Side was here as well. And so I think the Intuitive Side, I don't know if you have a YouTube channel. I think I've seen you on Facebook, though, or maybe on Twitter. And so, so thank you for that. I'm just happy that people are participating and giving quality work and putting the time and effort in. That's one of the things I really wanted to say. This is an opportunity to work with a group, have analysis done, share your work publicly, And everyone who participates here, if you want me to post your session under the video on our Patreon, it's free for anyone to link to or to click on and see. And so it kind of gives you a way, if you don't have a platform, of having a bit of a portfolio where you can say, look, I'm participating in these live streams, and you can see all my sessions. They're all there. If you want to, you do have to send me an email giving me permission. So if you participated last month and you didn't give me permission, I didn't post your session. So maybe you didn't see the email. I don't know, but check that out, because I don't want to do it for people who don't want that. But if you do, let me know. I'm putting them up there so that you can have your work shown and shared. I think that's an important thing. And so yes, I want to thank everyone who participated. Jeff and I are going to talk about, he might be giving a tasking a target for next month. So I think, again, for next month, we're going to do 2 targets, maybe 3, probably 2, depending. If Jeff is doing analysis on his own, then maybe we'll do 3. But if it's me doing the analysis, then we're only doing 2, just for time. But yeah, and so I'm going to try to mix it up. There are some targets that, I am trying to be sensitive of. I'm not going to give you a murder mystery. I'm not going to give you something that I know has gore. In our interview with Daz, David and I talked to Daz about UFO targets, alien targets, and I know some people are sensitive about that. And so until we're at the point where we're doing this regularly enough that I can have a little survey to say, like, do you consent to doing alien targets? I have to be a little bit careful, but I don't want to give you boring targets. The astronomical compendium, I thought it could be a boring target, but it could be a fascinating target depending on the viewer and their interest. And so I have to figure out that line of giving you something fun that's worth working on, that's worth doing all these pages, all this work. It has to be worth it for you. At the same time, I'm trying to be sensitive. And so please feel free to send me emails, let me know, like, I'm comfortable with doing this kind of stuff. I don't want to see you give us targets like this. Feel free to do that. And we can have it as a bit of a conversation. So David, there are things that you wanted to say, were you wanting to add some things?
Yeah, just a couple final thoughts. Grateful for Sasha putting this together, doing all the hard work with the analysis. This is, basically her she's running this whole thing. The other thing is that grateful to see everybody's work, everybody who submitted essentially contributed their work. Just as Sasha said, Patrick and others, it's interesting to always see what each person produces. I think it's just fascinating. The other thing is that everybody should be proud who submitted work. Like I'm saying, like for myself personally, I think about this as in the context of whether I hit or miss a target personally, the process of actually putting it out there publicly to try, essentially, like you're already a winner just from that perspective, regardless of what your data actually ends up being. But so you should all be proud of that fact, and the data look great that was presented. So yeah, I'm just very happy and hope that people continue to enjoy and develop from this.
Yes. Yeah. And so I invite everyone to participate again for next month. And I'm just very grateful. Yeah. It's fun. It's fun for me. It's fun for me to do analysis. It's fun for me to see your work. I get all excited. I send messages to David. Oh my goodness, wait till you see what this person did. And then the next day, oh my goodness, wait till you see what this other person did. I get so excited. It's just so fun to see your data and just, yeah, it's really delightful. And I hope that the audience finds something of value in this as well. I would like to see more involvement of the chat, but I don't really know how to do that yet, how to manage both. I think having David here helps a little bit as well, because then we can kind of have that attention to all the different things. And I'm going to fix my PowerPoint for next time. Hopefully. And so thank you very much. And also thank you for your thoughts, sharing your thoughts on the CRV presentation that I did. I think that these are conversations that are hard to have sometimes. There can be pushback, but we need to have them. And so thank you for that. And good luck for next month. I will be putting out the new target in the next probably a week and a half. And again, check your emails from me and send me an email if you want me to post your session under the video on Patreon. So I think that's it. David?
Yeah, that's it. I think we can shut it down.
Everybody else, this is the time to say goodnight. So good night, everyone, and thank you so much for being
Good
here.
night. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Bye. And